Welcome to a special edition of Perilously called Parking Perilously. This is a show in which we talk about a book we just read. Now, this book is by my favorite living author, Joyce Carol Oates. I would say my favorite authors are Thomas Hardy, Edith Wharton, and Joyce Carol Oates. Yeah, I would say those are the three. This book is a novel, and usually when I read a Joyce Carol Oates anything, I get done with it and I think, man, I want to know more. She always often talks about what people are thinking. So you'll be told what they're thinking, and then you'll be told what they're saying, and of course there's a difference there because she's very introspective and people are contradictory, and they hold contradictory thoughts in their heads, and they're puzzling, interesting. Their characters are developed. And so usually when I get finished with a short story of hers, I just think, oh man, I wish I was reading a novel because I want more. And I stopped reading her short stories because I kind of turn it into a novel. I'll finish the book, I'll finish the story, and it'll be, a wonderful description of somebody, or a wonderful look into their mind, and then it'll be over. And I'm like, well, I don't want it to be over. So then I read the next short story, and I'm conflating them. I'm like, oh yeah, well I'm filling in the blanks, thinking that this antagonist or protagonist somehow relates to the previous thing I read. But I say all that to say that when I saw this book in the library, Night, Sleep, Death, The Stars, a novel, immediately picked it up because any novel by Joyce Carol Oates that I haven't already read, I want to read it. And I thought, wow, I'm not gonna miss. I mean, it's like bigger than the Bible. It is. It was wonderful. It is 787 pages. I was expecting it to say more. I mean, this is like serious. It could be like 4 novels. But it was wonderful. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk a little bit about this book, but also about her other books. All right. Night, Sleep, Death, The Stars. This is thy hour, O soul, thy free flight into the wordless, away from books, away from art, the day erased, the lesson done, thee fully forth emerging, silent gazing, pondering the themes thou lovest best, night, sleep, death, and the stars. So that's a quote by Walt Whitman. One of the characters reads that, or speaks that quote at I think it's a Thanksgiving dinner. But that quote wouldn't really tell you much about the novel itself. What I want to talk about is this list of novels. With Shuddering Fall, A Garden of Earthly Delights, Expensive People, Them, Wonderland, Do With Me What You Will, The Assassins, Childwald, Son of the Morning, Unholy Loves, Bellafleur, Angel of Light, A Bloodsmore Romance, Mysteries of Winterthurn, Solstice, Maria, A Life, You Must Remember This, American Appetites, Because It Is Bitter and Because It Is My Heart, Blackwater, Foxfire, Confessions of a Girl Gang, What I Live For, Zombie, We Were the Mulvaneys, Man Crazy, My Heart Laid Bare, Broke Heart Blues, Blonde, Middle Age, A Romance, I'll Take You There, The Tattooed Girl, The Falls, Missing Mom, Black Girl, White Girl, The Gravedigger's Daughter, My Sister, My Love, Little Bird of Heaven, Mud Woman, The Accursed, Carthage, The Sacrifice, A Book of American Martyrs, Hazards of Time Travel, My Life as a Rat. Okay, do you realize how you kind of doze off in a big long list of titles like that? Consider that every single one of those titles is a huge novel. 1964 to 2019, every single one of those titles is a full novel. Now, she's been accused of not editing her work. There's a word for it. It's the kind of editing that a writer does after they've written a paragraph or a page and a half or a chapter. They go back and rework it. But when she makes a mistake, I almost think she made a mistake on purpose. She's a master craftsman. I would not accuse her of not being thorough. I would just say that she must write a lot, she must write most of her life. She's also written other books with a pseudonym. And I haven't Googled it, don't know if it would even be possible to prove, but she may have written under several pseudonyms. I wouldn't put it past her. So, I was introduced to Joyce Carol Oates from the short story Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? In a short story class in an anthology or textbook. And I started reading everything I could find by her. We had a novel of hers, paperback, that the family just had, and so I read that, and then I just got book after book from the library over the decades. For a while there, My Heart Laid Bare, 1998, was my favorite novel. I definitely recommend it. But when I read it again, I was like, it's not my favorite novel, but it's a great story, and many of them are. When I listen to that list being read, and how tedious it is just to read a list like that, and I think that each title represents an entire book. That's a lot of writing, right? That's a lot of reading I've done, and a lot of it is just wonderful. But of course, some are better than others. Some hit me at certain times in my life when certain things were going on and really spoke to me. The one that was about a subject I was already interested in was Blonde, which came out in 2000. And I was already reading about Marilyn Monroe. So when my favorite author or favorite living author wrote a book about something I was already interested in, that was fascinating. And it really brought into focus that I didn't know much about her life with the sons of Hollywood royalty. I hadn't even thought about that. I guess other authors hadn't picked up on that as much as Joyce did. In that book, I was shocked to realize that the man who was still alive, Marilyn's first husband, she just used a different name for him. And like I said earlier, when she makes a mistake, I think, well, it's not a mistake. There's a reason, right? And, Blonde is very introspective, like all of her works, and there's no way to substantiate a person's thoughts in that depth. So she probably didn't want to get sued. She probably didn't want to actually explore his thoughts. She just used the framework of Marilyn's life, which of course would include her first husband, to talk about Marilyn. And so she just used a different name for the guy. Fascinating. To me, it is an example that Joyce Carol Oates just makes choices. It's a choice. I wrote a novel. I changed the first husband's name. It's based on true events, but obviously I changed the first husband's name. So it's like she's not afraid to make a choice like that. Bold choices. There was this one novel, I can't find it in the list Um, but it had pages and pages of italics. It was like hard to read. Um, so it wasn't my favorite, but I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I guess, that sounds contradictory, but, I'm not reading a book to be completely comfortable with it. I'm reading a book to see what she's up to see what is going to happen, to see if I can think about something in a new way. But of course, you have to have passages and words and concepts you already know to be comfortable enough to even read a book, right? If people are panicked, they can't learn. But of course, this is much less dramatic. In order to learn, you have to build upon things step by step by step. When a baby is learning how to hear, they realize that a lot of those sounds are words, and then they learn a few words, and then they put it into context, and only once you've learned 10 words can you learn another one. Only once you've learned a little can you learn a little more. So I would not say her writing is experimental, because it's not that weird, but I would say that she makes some choices that other authors, she's not afraid to make choices. I mean, who writes books with pages of italics? Okay, so in this list of novels, which I read, and it's tedious to read, I try to determine which of them I've already read, which of them I haven't read, which one of them I've read more than once. Blonde was the only book I can remember that I immediately read again. And I'm not sure exactly why. I guess it probably hit me in a time when I was interested in that subject, but it just, it's the only book I just immediately wanted to read again. So let's talk about this book, Night, Sleep, Death, the Stars. Um, lots of times I chuckled out loud. A few times I thought of the author. Um, but that's probably only because I've read so many of her works. I think she's the type of author where you just assume that it's not an error. Like some books you're reading and something crazy happens, and I think, why did the author do that? But in her writing, I usually think, why did the character do that? Right? Like I give her a pass, and I ascribe the craziness to the character. In other words, the fourth wall isn't broken. I'm in the story, and I'm not thinking what's wrong with the author. I'm thinking what's wrong with the character, because the character's drawn so well that I'm believing it's real. There was one book, I wish I remembered which one it was, where a few years after I read the book, I was wondering what this person was up to, and then I realized the person wasn't up to anything, because it wasn't a person, it was a character in a Joyce Carol Oates novel. So I was actually thinking, looking back, what's so and so up to now? I haven't heard from them in years. A melancholy retrospective. I wonder what so and so's up to. Wonder what so and so's up to. And I included a character that wasn't up to anything. Anyway, so the book is very long, but when I got done with it, I still had questions. I still wanted to know more. The book is divided up into chapters that are each about particular characters, but the characters overlap in each chapter because we're talking about a family. What struck me about this book in relationship to her other books, or in contrast to her other books, is nothing freaky happened. Well, a few freaky things. But what I mean is, in much of her work, there's moments that are dreamlike. There's moments where a mysterious stranger will do something terrible. Now, this book has events in it that bad things happen. It's kind of hard to have a story without bad things happening, but they're not mysterious bad things. They're not, ooh, could that happen in real life? They're not about monsters or psychosis. There's a few. There was one episode that happened, and it didn't seem. It seemed like it might have been a dream, and then it was confirmed that it wasn't a dream. And then the same thing happened again. It's with a baseball bat. And the second one, I was like, okay, wait. Did that even happen? Or did that not happen? But other than that, she toned it down on the mysterious and on the supernatural stuff. Um, Way back when, there was a book called Son of the Morning, and there was Angel of Light. And so a lot of her work, I've noticed, has to do with Christianity. And so when I was younger and she mentioned Christianity, I thought, oh, well, that means that she's a Christian. I think I just wanted to see a commonality with me. But then I realized, no, she's just mentioning Christianity because Christianity is a big part of our culture. In this book, Christianity was mentioned a few times. I don't think important to the plot, just interesting to me, because I read that she's not a believer. And that is that there's a young adult Christian line of books. She doesn't talk about them in derision, but she doesn't build them up either. It's just a little part of the plot, a little part of the plot. And there's a character who is a Christian convert from a Nigerian country, from a Muslim country, Nigeria. No comment as to how Christianity shaped him or didn't shape him, just threw it out there. There's specific talk about so and so doesn't usually talk about anything religious, so and so isn't religious. And I think if she hates Christianity, which I have no evidence that she does, if she thinks it's benign and looks at it with mild amusement, no matter what she thinks about Christianity, she's writing from an objective point of view. She's not laughing at the Christian in derision, which is really easy to do. She's not showing us just the good side of a Christian or just the bad side of a Christian, or she's just throwing it out there because it's part of the types of lives she describes. She's often writing about upstate New York. There are a lot of parallels with other books with Revolutionary War, American Revolutionary War references. My Heart Laid Bare starts with the American Revolution and follows religious through a family. It's how is religion, how do these people take religion and live their lives through this family? And John Updike does a similar thing in The Beauty of the Lilies. In The Beauty of the Lilies, John Updike, I think it's father, son, and son, so grandson, three generations, three male generations of a family, and how religion shaped them. And then My Heart Laid Bare is similar, but it's not as specific as John Updike's work. Let's see. So in this book, there's a lot about what happens after someone dies. So in this book, one of the paranormal uh, facets, which I don't find odd, I just find it part of psychology, is that the people who are alive are hearing the voice of the person that is no longer alive. So if if you really think someone's talking to you from beyond the grave, that's one thing. But if you hear your parent's voice, for instance, in the back of your head telling you what your parent would say, to me that's just psychology. That's just how people are. We have an inner monologue, and that inner monologue is a combination of what we would say at different times in our lives. And sometimes we would say to ourselves exactly what our parents would say. We just echo that thought from childhood throughout our entire lives. And so there's that. I just finished another book about someone surviving widowhood, and that's just some books that I've read recently. 3 or 4 of them have dealt with that theme, and it's a time in my life where that would just strike me as real. In this book, Night, Sleep, Death, the Stars, Joyce Carol Oates leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Even though it's huge, I want to know what else is going to happen. I want to fill in the gaps. What I noticed about this one is that everybody's so mean. And these are not villains. These are family members who would think of themselves as good people, right? But they're also mean to each other. The siblings are squabbling and just disagreeing. And the part that I'm thinking of now is when the will was read. They were all mad. Why were they all mad? They were all mad because they were given the same amount of money. So one person thinks they should have got less because they weren't a good kid. The other thinks they should have got more because they're raising kids. The other one thinks they should get more because they're more involved in the family business. One thinks it's like they got the same, but they're mad. Now if they had all got different, they would have been mad too. So one of the things in the novel that I noticed is that people don't say what they mean. People don't mean what they say. People don't if they're going to be mad, they're going to be mad, and they just put the circumstances of their life in such a frame as to make them mad. And if they're going to be not mad, which is characterized by the character Jessalyn, if they're going to not be mad, then they just frame everything in that way. So she's interpreting everything as, oh, well, that's what happened, but here's an excuse for that behavior that could be seen as bad. And then all the other people in the novel, the living people in the novel, are all just doing the opposite, just seeing only the bad. And she's not only seeing the good, but she's deliberately framing things in a positive way so she can have a good life. And the rest of them are just her children are just making themselves miserable. Joyce Carol Oates is an educator, I believe at Princeton, but another school too, I think. So a university educator. And she talks about a high school educator who just does some things that an academic would find reprehensible. But yet, she's not a villain either. There are no villains in this story. a bunch of anti-heroes, I suppose. Um, so there's a little bit about gender, there's a little bit about race, there's a little bit about um, people of different ages, but it's mostly, and I think all of her work is like this, it's mostly what people are thinking in contrast with what they're doing and what other people think of them. So, in other words, somebody does something and you see an action, and it could be a very simple action just for the point of this illustration, a very simple action. But behind it, they have all these thoughts that could have led them to do the opposite action. And the people viewing that action can interpret the meaning behind it and the reasons why in completely opposite ways. So I don't know if the answer to why people do things and say things and think things is their temperament as opposed to their circumstances. We all know that what we do and say and think has to be a result of where we are and who we are and what's happened to us. But what is the deciding factor? You know, why do two people go through the same trial and come out in two completely different ways? One is crushed, the other is triumphant. So those are questions that she explores. I don't think she answers them. I think she explores them. Um, like I said, this novel didn't have too much creepy stuff in it. Some of her earlier stuff had evil people in it. Like the short story, Where Are You Going, Where You Been? Arnold Friend is, just probably evil incarnate, but we don't know why. We don't know what else is going on in his head. He's a villain, and he's weird. He's, mysterious, the mysterious stranger, the evil that's lurking in the shadows. So this novel didn't really have that. But I asked her a question, and she came to speak for a lecture. It was called the Distinguished Lecture Series, and there were a lot of famous people that I got to hear speak, and they said a question and answer portion. So I wrote out a question, and it was read to her, and she answered it. And I think that she was surprised of my appraisal of her work. I said something like, "Your work often deals with darkness and evil," but I wasn't that straightforward. But your work often deals with I don't know, the bad side of people, the evil. Um, but do you think that people are shaped evil by some concept of like original sin, which of course she probably wouldn't use those words, or do you think that they're shaped into that, molded into that by things that happen to them? Some kind of question like that, something about evil. And I think that at the time, she didn't really think of herself as exploring evil. I think she thought of herself as not being any more not talking about evil any more than what really happened in the world. But we all have experienced evil, but it's not a news. The news does not describe what really happens, right? The news just tells us the worst things. And for a while, her novels just seem to tell us about the worst things. Whereas this is more just telling us about normal people, and of course, bad things happen, but they're not that mysterious. They're not that scandalous. They're not that sensationalized. So I would recommend this novel. I would recommend any of her work. I'm interested to see what she comes up with next. Like I said, I would like to go back and read the ones I haven't read and maybe the ones I have. I wonder if it would be profitable to read them in order or not. Um, so I guess that's it for this. It's not really a review, but the thinking about this particular book and how it relates to my other thoughts about the author. So anyway, that's it for Joyce Carol Oates. There's a joke that some author said about her. What are the three saddest words in the English language? Joyce Carol Oates. And I laughed just because I'm familiar with her name and because she writes so much that you would think she's chained to a desk with a chalk and a slate and she does nothing else. But even if that were true, which of course it's not sad at all because she's creating wonderful examples of literature, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And if that were all she ever did, it's a wonderful output. But of course, I know she must do something else, and it's really not sad at all. Um, so thanks for listening. That is it. This has been 31 and a half minutes of me rambling. Often wonder why I don't take notes, and then I could fill in some of the gaps. But anyway, I hope you will discover this author if you're not already familiar. All right, that's it. Take care.